Okay, so last night, just like the rest of the normal people in the world, I was watching the Tesla truck unveiling event on the internet. And I'm not gonna lie, when that thing rolled out onto the stage, I thought they were faking. I didn't think that was real. And I was a little bit freaked out by the design, which is strange because I'm a designer and you'd think I'd be okay with outlandish things. But previous to this event, I had made up my mind that I was going to buy a Tesla truck if it was under $50,000. That's just my budget. And Elon Musk said that it was going to be, so I was in. And I kind of started to change my mind when I first saw that thing roll out onto stage. But 24 hours have gone by and I've had a lot of time to think about it. And the more I think about it, the more that truck just really makes sense. It really does. The shape of it, the designers really knew what they were doing. And well, emotionally speaking, I might still be a little freaked out about the design. It's cerebrally speaking, just awesome. Like I can't find any fault with it. Let me show you guys what I'm talking about. So here's the Cybertruck website from Tesla. And if we scroll down here, we see this, the exoskeleton as they're calling it. So let's compare that exoskeleton to an F-150, a Ford. And you can see that they're similar sized. And I'm guessing here, this is sort of a rough approximation. We haven't received the exact specs that are going to be on the Tesla, but it's a full-size truck. So I think that's a pretty good overlay. That's the comparison. Now, a couple of key takeaways from this overlay. Look where the headrest is from the Ford F-150. Look where it sits in the Tesla. So obviously the seating position on the Tesla is a whole lot lower than the F-150. And that's accomplished just because all of the structure of the body on the Tesla is moved to the skin instead of having that frame that you have to sit up on top of like you do on the F-150. Also, just look at how much more sleek the Tesla is. This is going to go through the air a whole lot better. And to illustrate that, let's just look at the F-150 by itself and overlay this airfoil over the top of it. We can see just how much of a mismatch there is between the airfoil and the F-150. The front end doesn't look, at all aerodynamic. It's not matching that graceful curve at all. And at the back, we have this blunt edge right here behind the cab, and that's key. There's this massive thing. Mythbusters even did this whole deal about driving with your tailgate down or whatever. But there's this massive vortex of wind that happens back behind your truck that's just really inefficient. So you're wasting all kinds of gas to push this truck down the road because of that inefficient way that they're putting the wind back together back behind the truck. So you want to take the wind apart here at the front, you're splitting it, and then you want to put it together nicely at the back, and this truck does not do good at either of those tasks. Contrast that with the Tesla design here, and you can see that despite this angular shape, it's actually pretty close to that airfoil. So this is going to be really energy efficient, and I like that. So even though it's electricity, it's running on batteries, that power has to come from somewhere. And in a large portion of the United States, that power comes from burning coal. So you're still burning something to get down the road. There's just sort of an extra step in between there. So having an energy efficient vehicle is important to me. I don't want to kill the planet. Okay, back here on the Tesla website, if we scroll down a little, we're going to see this video here, and there's a lot of tantalizing information here in this video. Let's take a closer look at that. Starting here with this freeze frame, we can see this bump in the front, and I think that's the differential. It could be the engine. The electric engines are a lot smaller than an internal combustion engine. If this was an ICE, classic truck, that would definitely be the differential there, but I don't know, can't say for certain. But what I can say for certain is look at how nicely distributed it is, right down the middle, which is where you want it. Because of the way that four-wheel drive works and a lot of that stuff, in a lot of trucks we find differentials placed on either side of the center line, and there's drawbacks to that. So having a centered differential seems obvious, and yet it's not, and it is clearly an advantage. So that's nice to have. Here in this slightly skewed view, we can see the independent front suspension. This looks like just your classic A-arm front suspension. And watching the videos of everybody who got a test drive, you can clearly see that the movement is IFS up there, independent front suspension. So that'll be a nice plush ride, which is what everybody's reporting. But the question is, what's happening in the back, right? That's a whole lot harder to tell. Now, the classic configuration for a truck is to have a solid rear axle, and that's because solid axles carry the weight. They do. But solid axles ride really poorly. Like, it's just a really rough ride on a solid axle. So is this a solid axle? Well, look at this bar. You see this bar? You see that air gap there? Let's take a look at this video. So you can see clearly there's a bar back there, and I don't see a bump from a differential. That's really interesting. So back to the Tesla website here, we can see that the single motor truck is a rear-wheel drive, and the dual motor truck is an all-wheel drive vehicle. So no matter what, it looks like we have drive power going to the rear wheels in all versions of the truck. And so this just makes it interesting to me that there's that lowered bar there, and we can't see a rear differential. Now take a look at this picture. This is the rear end off of a Ram ProMaster van, and we see a similarly lowered rear axle, solid rear axle. And they did this on the ProMaster here to give them more floor space, flat floor space there inside the cab of the van, and also, still being able to accommodate that spare tire and the leaf springs and all of that stuff. So they lowered the axle, and that gave them more room to fit stuff between the axle and the body. So probably Tesla is doing something similar, and we just can't see the differential here in the video or the motor. I think the motor's back there and the differential are all just sort of tucked up above the strength axle. So I think that bar there is what gives us the solid axle performance. And that's not performance as far as like ride quality and things that passengers would want, but that's performance as far as weight, hauling, and trailering ability. You need that rear axle to really make it a truck. So this is what the truck looks like as they're showing it. And I hate these wheels. I think these are most of what's freaking me out about the truck. Now, what even are these? So if you look closely, you can see the rubber on the tires has been sort of like cut out to coincide with the hubcaps. And those are hubcaps. Those are clearly hubcaps. I have no idea why those are there. I think they're 100% style, and I don't like them. So let's overlay some quote unquote normal rims and tires that you would find these days, and suddenly the truck does not look as strange. I mean, it's still a crazy beast, but I can deal with this a whole lot more. And if this truck that I buy comes with these hubcaps, you can bet that I'm going to be doing this to my truck to make it look just a little bit more normal. But what you're seeing here, this styling, this is, I think, more function than form. So let's jump into CAD and I'll show you. We'll do a quick little analysis. Okay, so this is a very blocky version of what a modern pickup truck looks like. Now, all pickup trucks are the same. They all have a subframe or the frame. So they're what's called body-on-frame construction. And this frame traces its roots back to the Model T Ford. So it's that old, and the original pickup trucks were just Model T Ford cars that people cut the back ends off of so that they could put a bed back there. So yeah, you have this frame, and that's where all of the weight is carried. All of the suspension mounts to the frame, and after you get the frame, you put the engine inside of it. That's the engine. Goes to a gearbox, which sends a drive shaft all the way to the back through this differential into the rear axle, which drives the rear wheels. So that's where the rear wheel drive comes from. And that drive shaft is key because it requires you to bump up the cabin. If we see the cab here, the transmission is colliding with the box that I've drawn to represent the cab. So you need to put a tunnel in there to give yourself some clearance for the driveline components. So even sitting the box up on top of the frame, which means that you have a very tall vehicle that you have to step up into, and that's still not enough. You still need to make the driveline tunnel. So after you put the cab on there, you can then put a bed on there and how about some covering for the engine. And after you put these features on, you can put some side skirts on and some grille in the front, and that's more or less the anatomy of a modern truck. And unfortunately, it dictates a number of trade-offs. First of all, your truck has to be very tall because you have to get up over the top of this frame. People can't sit down inside the frame. You need that space for structure. Okay, and also that bed has to sit up quite high because it has to clear these bumps in the back, and those bumps in the back are there to accommodate the suspension travel. See, when that axle needs to move up and down, it needs to have somewhere that it can go. So yeah, there's just certain things that are dictated by this construction style, and we've been beholden to this paradigm since what, 1925, 1910, something like that. So this is a very old design, and it really is time to get beyond this and the trade-offs that come along with it. So in comparison, here's a quick mock-up I drew of the Tesla frame. and the frame and body are all the same. So this is what's typically called a unibody construction in the automotive industry. And it's an exoskeleton. Tesla got it right there. And what you can see this allows them to do is drop the passenger compartment to the level of where the frame sits on a normal truck. So instead of that being the frame, that's now the floor where you sit. And so that allows you to make the vehicle a whole lot shorter in profile, which means better energy efficiency. And let's just put these two designs on top of each other. So here you can see the Tesla body sort of positioned over the normal frame of a typical pickup truck. And you can see that the frame would be going right through the passenger compartment. But even if we got rid of the frame, we still have to worry about that axle or the drive shaft coming off of the engine, as well as the engine from a typical internal combustion truck. So get rid of those as well, because you've got much smaller electric engines that can be mounted right in line with the axle. So the rear wheels are going to be driven by a motor mounted here at the back, and the front wheels will be driven by a motor at the front. And suddenly you have all of this extra space for other truck related activities like hauling cargo and hauling passengers and whatnot. But the Tesla design is also smart, and this is why I said it's function over form, because it's a pyramid, and there's almost nothing stronger shape-wise than a pyramid. You look at triangles; they appear everywhere in space frames and bridges and all of that. So triangles are very strong. Now this isn't purely a space frame design. This is definitely a rigid frame. You have rigid connections here. You have rigid connections everywhere, really. To be a space frame, this upright would be meeting the roof line right there at the apex of the triangle. But hey, you still have pyramid type construction, which means it's very strong, and that means very stiff as well, and that's desirable. So really, this design is tremendously intelligent, and alien, crazy looking as it is, I think we're going to find that it's incredibly functional. So that's all well and good. On paper and doing a design analysis, the truck looks like a good idea. But good ideas don't sell trucks, so why am I personally going to buy it? Yeah, I need to tell you what a truck means to me in order to finish telling you why I'm definitely buying this thing that kind of scares me. Let me show you a couple of the vehicles that I've owned. Now, I've always had trucks. They're a tool for me in my life, and they're completely intertwined with every major life move and everything that's ever happened to me. I've always had a truck. So starting off with this 1985 single cab, that thing had no space in the cabin. It had a solid front axle. You can see these are two photos I found online. But that solid front axle makes for a very rough ride. It's not ideal. So the independent front suspension is better. This was a Toyota 4Runner, basically a pickup truck that I bought that had independent front suspension. So it had a much nicer ride. But the one that I got had a first gear that wouldn't stay in first gear on the stick shift. So I had to get rid of that one. And what I ended up buying was another one that was turbocharged. So this is the vacuum diagram under that hood, and you can see the 22 RET or RTE. So the T stands for turbo and the E stands for fuel injected. So they only made 1,100 of these, and I was stoked to have this when I got it. It had been in a front end collision, not terrible, but bad enough. So I got the frame straightened out at the at the alignment shop, and then I found another red Toyota pickup truck that I could pull the entire front end off, all the clip and skirt back behind there included. So I replaced that in all the sheet metal on the front end, and this is what it looked like. Then I pulled the engine out, which was this engine here, which is the stock turbocharged motor, and I replaced it with the one that I had rebuilt, that I had pulled out of the tan one back here, this 1985 one. For those of you who care, 1985 was the last year of the solid front axle, and the solid front axle is actually pretty desirable for people who want to go rock crawling, because the axles can articulate like this, so it can really crawl well over all those obstacles. But I wanted independent front suspension because I want to be able to go fast through, on dirt roads. I'm not huge into rock crawling. I do it once in a while, but this was just my dream truck at the time. Keep in mind, you guys, this was 2004, 2005, something like that. So the internet was not what it is today, and there weren't that many forums talking about turbocharging your Toyota pickup truck. And so I didn't have a whole lot of great advice. I was kind of a self-educated mechanic, and I made one large mistake, and that is the fact that I ran a soft oil line to the turbo. So you need about a foot of hard, just metal line that comes off the turbo. And the reason is because the exhaust manifold gets to 900 degrees. It glows red hot, and that 900-degree temperature will melt through your oil line, which is exactly what happened to me. Hot engine oil spewed all over the exhaust manifold, caught on fire, burned up the whole engine compartment, and there went 9 months of my life, and I was without a vehicle. The car that I had been driving around while working on this one in the garage was dying as well, and I just really didn't want to go into more debt to buy another car, so I joined the Navy. And while I was in the Navy, I was T-boned by a step van, and I was in a minivan. You can see all that blood on the airbag there. That's the blood that came from my face. Here's a couple of other photos of that driver's seat just to show you how severe the crash was. This is what my femur pretty much still looks like to this day. They took those 4 screws out, but the femoral shaft is still in there, and yeah, I can feel it when the weather changes. I feel it in my bones. So pretty severe accident, which now is a good time to talk about the safety of a Tesla. So why is it that our society completely retooled itself, right? We got a whole new government department, and all kinds of changes happened when 1,500 people died in a terrorist attack. And yet, 35,000 to 40,000 people die every single year as a result of motor vehicle accidents. But you don't see people marching on Washington to make our roads safer, right? This accident had nothing to do with me, no fault of mine, and yet I almost died. The guy who I bought that very first pickup truck from, I bought it from his mother because he had been in a motor vehicle accident which left him more or less brain dead. And so he was in a wheelchair, and he couldn't speak, or he was done. And he had a 3-year-old daughter. So his wife was effectively a widow, and his mother now has to take care of him for the rest of his life because of an automobile accident. So there's 2 instances in my life where vehicles and crashes have been massive. So who is single-handedly making, the world a safer place as far as motor vehicle accidents go? Tesla. Tesla's doing it because human beings are not good drivers. And I love to drive. I always drive stick shifts, right? I am a tactile driver. I love it. But I'm willing to admit that people are terrible drivers, and I've suffered the consequences personally and traumatically. And so I am all for the safety, which is probably the primary reason that I want a Tesla over any other truck, because show me another vehicle that can drive itself. All right, enough said there. Here is the hospital bed. This is what my face looked like right after the accident. It looked like hamburger meat. The plastic surgeons did a pretty good job stitching it back together. I bet none of you guys even noticed the scar before. So yeah, I'm lucky enough to have that. Anyway, after I recovered from that whole accident, a buddy of mine in the Navy had this truck sitting on his friend's farm outside of the base out there in rural Virginia, and he sold it to me for pretty cheap, and I started rebuilding it. But the bed had a lot of rust on it, had to go, so I bought a 2-wheel drive bed. That was the best that I could find out there, and then I got to work modifying the fender flares. You can see just how narrow they are. They're not nearly wide enough for a 4-wheel drive vehicle. So yeah. Put this carpenter's cloth from the Home Depot, screwed it into the bodywork, into the body panels there, and then put a ton of Bondo onto that carpenter's cloth and sanded it down and shaped it and sculpted it, and ended up with this. This is what it looked like when it went to the painters. And you can see I replaced the doors and the hood as well, but it was ready to go. It was all smooth and looked good. Okay, so coming back from the painters, this is what it looked like. And I was stoked. I was super proud of this truck. It already ran pretty well. The engine was strong, but it was that 22R engine, not the turbo version in this truck. So this rig, towing my trailer there, had a max speed of probably 60, 65 miles per hour, just depending on if you were going downhill or had a tailwind or whatever. And this really mattered when I went to go drive across the state of Wyoming. For those of you who don't know, Wyoming has prevailing winds from the west to the east that blow at like 30 miles per hour. So my entire drive across the massive state of Wyoming was in second gear, getting 4 miles to the gallon at 30 miles per hour on the highway. just miserable. And that's when I made up my mind to not have this truck anymore. It was not powerful enough for me, and I wasn't about to, duplicate my experience where I light my truck on fire, because I don't do the turbo right or whatever. And I wasn't going to put a 6-cylinder or 8-cylinder, Chevy into it like some people do. I was done. I wanted a reliable truck that the engineers had figured out how to make it powerful enough from the get-go. By the way, this is a glamour shot. That's the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in New Mexico. So I had a lot of fun four-wheel driving there in the desert. This is the camper shell that I bought. You can see the gap there at the top where it meets the cab. I had to fix that, so I modified that, and it looked pretty nice. And I was on my way out to the West Coast with that truck. So it did get me all the way to Oregon. Here I am four-wheel driving it. You can hear the clunk as I hit that rock. So the ground clearance wasn't quite what I needed it to be, but that just left a dent in the bash plate there. So nothing too tragic. And I ended up buying this rig when I could afford it. And I loved this truck. This is a 2001 Toyota Tacoma, and it had like 40 horsepower more than the 22 RE. So this one was enough. I could tow that trailer at 65, even up hills, maybe up a steep hill, I'm stuck at 45, but none of this 25 miles per hour on the highway stuff anymore. So this truck did its job for me, and I used this thing for years. Here's a picture of it in front of the only house that I've ever owned. I'm no longer a property owner, but this was a house that I did a lot of renovations to, and I used the truck like crazy to haul the materials for the renovations, the plywood, the drywall, the studs. Like I have a history in construction and carpentry, and so I was able to really use this truck as a carpentry tool to haul materials. And I sold that house for a nice profit, and everything was good. So then I used it to move. This is in Michigan, by the way, where I went to graduate school. And then I moved back to the West Coast with the same truck, towing that same trailer. And on the West Coast, I found this Toyota thing that they were doing where they were like giving away name badges for your vehicle. So I named the truck George, and the font matched, and it was from Toyota. So that was just fun. So that was George. And here's George when I first moved to California, and I didn't have a place to live yet, so I split my time. Every other night I would get a hotel, and then the other nights I would sleep in the back of the truck. And this was some rancher's property in the central coast of California, overlooking the ocean there, just gorgeous. And I got chased off that land that following morning. But I stayed there that night, so it was one night of camping anyway. And then I met my wife. So here we are in the Carrizo Plain National Monument. You can see the truck in the background. We did a lot of camping in that. This was just great fun when we got together. Here's a campsite that we had one night, my wife and I. You can see how I did the bed in the back there, and you can just see the sense of adventure to just drive out into the middle of nowhere and just, be able to camp and just feel self-sufficient in the middle of the desert. It's really fun. I really liked doing this. Here is on the other side of the mountain from the Carrizo Plain, the craziest thing that I ever started to try to do in the truck. I started my way up that hill, and then I had second thoughts. And you can see why here, because this rut here I probably could have driven over, but you can see how steep it is with my wife standing there. And this is the ruts right behind me where I was standing. That's how crazy they got. Probably not quite 40 degrees and just rutted like crazy. And I think that the truck would have made it up that. But I wasn't going to try because we were quite a hike away from the highway. So even if I crashed or rolled the truck, there's nobody there to save me. And if we weren't hurt, I still would have had a heck of a hike back to the highway. So it was bad news, and I had to let that one go. So challenge not met. But anyway, that was the honeymoon phase of when I got together with my wife. And then this happened. So you can see I've got a family now. So a 2-year-old son who has to ride in a car seat. And unfortunately, the extended cab versions of Toyota pickup trucks aren't big enough to handle a car seat. So anytime that I have to go anywhere with my family, I can't take the son, right? The wife could sit in the seat, but I mean, you can't go anywhere without your kids. So the only time I ever used this truck anymore for the last 2 years was when I had to go somewhere all by myself. So no more camping with the family, and pretty much just use it to haul plywood or, to go to a meeting for work or something like that. So yeah, about 6 months ago, a couple of guys came knocking at my front door. One of them spoke English, the other one only spoke Spanish, and they wanted to buy my truck. I think they wanted to take it to Mexico or South America or somewhere. These trucks are very popular down there, and they're just hard to come by. Once people get a hold of these Toyota trucks, they don't let them go. But I let mine go. I let them take it because it just wasn't doing anything for me. I want to be able to take my family camping. I want to, still be able to haul plywood, and I want to be able to camp on the back of it. I would sleep in the back of that 6-foot bed. So that's my dream truck, right? Seating for 4 to 6 people. A 6-foot long bed that I can sleep in or haul plywood in, and safety. I'm very, very concerned with safety, and also 4-wheel drive because I want to be able to go off-roading in it. And that's why I'm buying a Tesla truck, because it's the logical choice. It's the absolute perfect tool for my life. But I am still freaked out by the design. And let's talk about that. So humans have an aversion to newness, like that's been well documented in psychology. And it's a pretty obvious answer why that is. New things might kill you. The old, boring, tried and true things aren't going to kill you. They're safe. So it's built into our DNA to be afraid of things that we've never seen before. Snakes, or maybe a new person comes into town and they're an axe murderer, or, if something's been around you for a while, it's not going to kill you. It hasn't killed you yet, but new things could. So even as a designer who's constantly looking to come up with new ideas or to do something in a way that nobody's done it before, I find that I, on impulse, reject everything new also. It's only through great effort and concentrated, purposeful searching that I'm able to put those feelings of oh, it's new, I don't like it, aside to judge things on their merits instead of emotionally. And so that's what I'm doing to the tune of $40,000 to $50,000 when I buy this pickup truck. And it's going to be the first new car that I've ever purchased. So this is a pretty massive thing for me, and I'm really excited. So I can't wait for the next year when they finally come up with, when they finally start selling that truck. So wish me luck. Hopefully it all works out, and thanks for watching. See you next time.